Welcome back to DM-Nastics, the gym for dungeon masters to work out their minds. I'm one of your hosts, DM Neil, aka Jote Maniac. And your normal host, Celeste, is not here because she went to a convention and immediately got sick, because that's how conventions work. So instead, I have a full house. So we just want to go around and introduce ourselves.
Sure. I'm Reed Reimer. I'm a composer and founder of Fable Factory, the creative studio.
I'm Snails. I'm a lead designer for the company Action Fiction, and I've worked on projects ranging from 5e to non-5e projects.
I'm Brad. I'm a co-founder of Action Fiction. I'm heading up a lot of the mechanics on Cthulhu Dreamt. I've also worked on a lot of 5e stuff and a lot of non-5e stuff.
So one of the things we do for lifting the mental weights is typically we'll just find things on the internet, and often Celeste and I will go more towards the very clickbaity things to then process and like help our listeners say, okay, I know you either got bamboozled or completely tricked by this ridiculous title, but here's some of the things that we can still learn. So today, though, because I have much more experts than myself in the house, I think we're going to just talk about Cthulhu the whole time, if anyone's up for that.
My mind is ready.
Yeah.
Done. Okay, so there's an article, and you'll find it in the show notes. Proverbially, I'll point down there, but it's a podcast. Imagine me pointing. And I have linked over to DM Dave's take on adding Cthulhu to Dungeons and Dragons. And I would say, I think my first question, and we can go around with this, is what is the one thing, if you were going to add Cthulhu to your D&D game, like what is the one thing you want to make sure happens?
I mean, I don't want to cop anything out, but being like a Cthulhu fanboy, I would like the party would immediately die.
Yeah.
I think maybe this is obvious, but I'd want a player or four to be involved with Cthulhu somehow. I think otherwise you can add Cthulhu to any. You can just say Cthulhu exists, and then the party completely ignores anything there. But the old Lovecraft stories and a lot of the stuff that's inspired by him sort of has to do with the process of slowly losing your mind or dealing with having like think about The Color from Outer Space or the Dunwich Horror, where things sort of start off normal and then slowly get weirder and weirder and weirder. I think that is sort of the vibe that I would want to go for if I were to have a Cthulhu-centric campaign.
I'm a little weird in that if I was going to add Cthulhu, I would not want to add Cthulhu into my campaign as like a creature that my players could fight. I think I would want the big thing that I would want to like bring in, like the one thing would be the feeling of like a natural disaster. Whereas like Cthulhu is a thing that happens to the world around you because you're supposed to be so much smaller than him and like you're like ants to him. I feel like really having the players deal with like the effects of him existing would be the thing that I would want to focus on.
Well, first off, I love all of those answers because my thought is, yeah, you died. Have fun. But that can easily be the start of a story.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I feel like it's been a really long time since it's come up, is you can show your players something on this level and still not have them interact with it for a while, because it could either be rumors or it could be in the far distance that Cthulhu has risen, things have happened, but you're still just living your day-to-day life sort of thing. So I like, all of those. And again, the second you add hit points means it can die. So that's always an interesting thing. In the same way that if you don't want someone to roll a 1 or a 20, then you can't have them roll, because inevitably that's what they will roll. So all of those things. Oh man, there's so many good options. So one of the things is that they've added, so DM Dave has done this, and I think this is also of the idea that either your party is very large or has more than 20 levels, because their travel pace, they put it in miles per hour. And I really don't know what to do with that initially, because I'm like, no, this is a square-based grid. What do you mean 8 miles an hour? Like, what's the grid translation for that? So yeah, I think, would you ever have your players fight directly? And my gut answer is no, but just check in the room. Would you have your players fight Cthulhu straight up?
I think in a game like D&D 5e that is designed to be heroic fantasy, after they've done a full campaign of 220 or beyond potentially, I think I might, as a way to end the campaign, because D&D is a genre that is intended to be people taking on things they otherwise should not be able to take on, right? It's meant to be heroic. Cthulhu ends up being sort of a weird thing to throw in there, though, because I think, narratively, even, if you will, Cthulhu really shines in an environment where he is, or they are, presumably, elder gods are beyond gender and our concept of pronouns. They are incalculable, beyond anything that we could even conceive, inconceivable, even, if you will.
Well, I think that lends itself towards the same, like some of the basic concepts behind some of the times that gods in Faerun, which you Forgotten Realms as your prime example, is that oftentimes when they show up, it's an avatar of them. Even in spite of the grandiose size that Cthulhu often arrives via the ocean, even that could be conceptually an avatar. Once you're thinking of this, and where would Cthulhu originally exist, in the infinite vastness of wherever that may be. So even though this is a 5,000 hit point creature that we're staring at on this side of things, with a threshold of 100, which I think in turn means if you didn't do 101 damage, you did 0 damage. But the idea that could even still be but an avatar. And even defeating that is only, is this just the concept of a Tarrasque turned up to 11,000?
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, to piggyback on Brad too, D&D, when you play it long enough, your character can get to almost like a godlike level. So what better way to like test that metal than to pit yourself against an elder one? So yeah. I could totally see that being just a completely fun and really just intense scenario, with a party of godlike friends and whatever, to just see how that fantasy would play out.
A quick point to the nature of Cthulhu being sort of larger than life. DM Dave has put Cthulhu's height 1,000 feet tall right after his alignment, which is just so funny to me. The idea that he's chaotic evil, and that's partially because he's so big. Because like the taller you are, the closer you are to being evil is sort of the implication there. It's just something that I saw that I wanted to throw out, but slightly more to the point. You can't treat Cthulhu like a normal monster, I think, because he can speak all languages at once to everybody in a 5-mile radius, because he's got 5,000 hit points, because he's 1,000 feet tall. Like you were saying, Reed, I think it's for like one final go out in a blaze of glory type situation, really test that metal, do or die.
One thing DM Dave does here that I do like, because Cthulhu is so big, he treats the different body parts as like their own individual encounters. And I think that's kind of like, if I was going to have my party go up and actually fight up against Cthulhu, that's kind of how I would treat it, where it's each piece of him is like an individual encounter, sort of Shadow of the Colossus style, where you're fighting your way through and up to just even get at the parts that are important. Personally, I think I wouldn't have my party fight him at least straight up. I think there would need to be some kind of ritual or something to like bind Cthulhu into a form that's easier to deal with. Because what DM Dave has here is truly beyond ridiculous in terms of like power scale and creep. There's an old proverb from the 3rd edition, which is, if you set it, they'll kill it. And you mentioned that earlier. And I don't know, I can't see the average party killing this particular incarnation of the Great Old One. You've got effects like Mind Blast that deal 20 d10 plus 10 psychic damage. And if you save a DC 27 intelligence saving throw, you permanently fall unconscious. And that's just an action for this guy. So I'm not saying that the DM Dave hasn't created a accurate representation of what going up against a Great Old One would feel like. But I think it's a prime example of why, if you're thinking about bringing this guy into your game, like straight like a straight up fight is probably not the way to go. Probably something dealing with a cult of his could be just as rewarding and just as challenging and more manageable for your players to deal with. Questing for the pieces of a ritual to like bind him into a mortal form where he can be killed and he doesn't have a damage threshold of 100 and 5,000 hit points, I think can still be just as heroic.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, now that I'm looking at it in that separation, one of the only ways I could feasibly see doing this is almost like a epic, like where you're going to like your local store and this is being put on almost as more of an event than anything else. And each of the several level 20 parties is one's going here, one's going there, one's doing this. Is there a yet another one doing that ritual, and they're all trying to hold the great old one off as long as possible for the ritual to actually occur, because just straight up your party. I mean,
that's a cool idea though, to do like an epic like that.
I love the Jason and the Argonauts feel there, sort of.
I failed my 27. I like it, and we've brought it up a few times recently on the podcast that like certain aspects of D&D is that like the save or suck sort of things is always interesting to try and pull those back some, because I did it recently where I stunned a player for multiple rounds and I was like, oh wow, that tactically that made sense, but from a fun perspective, that really wasn't even, I mean, that's not even that fun for me, because I didn't have to do a lot. I just said the thing and then they failed. And then they, I don't know, played on their phone for the next 20 minutes because they're like, yeah, that's my turn. I'm stunned.
Don't even get me started on stunning players in D&D 5e. Like spells and abilities that do that are just the antithesis of fun. A lot of people disagree with me, but it's something that I think players should be able to do to the dungeon master, but not in reverse. Because there's nothing worse feeling as a player than coming around to your turn and going, well, I don't get to do anything. Moving on.
Yeah, but the Celeste said, Celeste thing was, I just don't do it anymore. And my thing now is moving forward, I will do it at most for one round, unless I am like, it is my resources of the monster is wholly spent on doing that. But even then, I don't think I would do it. But, so I have an interesting question. I have an interesting question that I had not thought of until right this moment. What would we do? I mean, I guess if we use it as an ender, then it is what it is. But what would I do if they kill?
If the party manages to
like what
Cthulhu's.
is even an epilogue based conversation about the ramifications of that being accomplished, because my thought is, often, again, my go-to touch point is certainly the Forgotten Realms, but oftentimes you have a deity be removed and their portfolio sits open until someone else takes that over. The power vacuum that you create because you kill the great old one, like, did you destroy everything? Is that the not fun? Is that the Mass Effect ending?
We talked about this a fair amount when we were making Merca, which is the 5e American culture parody setting that Snails and I created with a couple of friends of ours. I say friends. When you spend that much time together, it becomes family. But one of the things you can do there is it's less about destroying the god and more about getting more followers, getting more worship. And the concept of like an open spot in the elder gods pantheon is a really intriguing idea. It almost feels like I want that to be the start of a different campaign, right? Some of the backstories of some of my favorite gods in Faerun or in Galarian, which is the Pathfinder setting, are about taking over domain, like some gods taking over domains or like plotting to do that. So the idea that, that would be an interesting way to motivate, to give your players that power too. Maybe someone like Haster or Nyarlathotep or somebody else is attempting to take Cthulhu's spot. That would be a good way to give your party the power to to overcome potentially these threshold 20 and 30 on the lower stuff, but a threshold 100 on his head, do that 5,000 points of damage, be able to put them against Cthulhu, and also like give yourself an out for what happens afterward. and what parts of Cthulhu's sort of mythos are innate to him and what are parts innate to the position, right? Does like if Haster takes over, does the poem become Great Haster sleeps in a dead relay waiting? I'm so sorry to all the all the poetry majors, everybody who's out there yelling at me that I messed up that line. That would be intriguing.
Yeah, the other one that made me think of is about 10 years ago, there was Avengers vs. X-Men, and one of the storylines in that was the Phoenix Five. That the Phoenix was showing up, and they're like, oh, well, I'm Tony Stark. I'll figure out how to kill this. Air quote, kills it, and all it does is separate it into 5 pieces, and each of those pieces end up in 5 different people. So is it that... Oh man, because that can be the echoes of that into a new campaign is the players become deities, but that doesn't mean they're good.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it depends on how tall they are, but but once they have that power, what do they do? What do they do with that power? And setting the next campaign, and even you could have the warlock in the next campaign or the cleric or the paladin be to one of the previous players, sort of thing.
I think that's a great way to reset to 1 too. The idea that getting that much power suddenly creates a whole new scaling system for you. Because suddenly you're in a different plane of power, and it's sort of soft reboots. Also, to your point about the Phoenix Five, fantastic costumes, absolutely wonderful. Big fan of that. I haven't thought about the Phoenix Five in a hot second.
Oh man, all I could think when it happened was, show me alternates. Give me a what if. Like, what if these other 5, or just someone draw for me, please. Well, awesome. Okay, so I think we've definitely dabbled into what Cthulhu could mean for your D&D game, but I also think that there's more that we have to talk about. So I'll say words that get us there. So rather than let these mental gains go to waste, let's head to taking your supplements. Taking your supplements. So today on Taking Your Supplements, I don't remember how I found... someone told me about you. We were connected, and then I checked out a Kickstarter that you were all putting on. If you could see, I've taken some of the art assets and I've put them behind me because it's very easy to do. And so this Kickstarter is called Cthulhu Dreamt. And... just tell me. I don't want to... There are enough of you here that I don't need to say much else.
Well, Cthulhu Dreamt, or Cthulhu, sorry. It is a project, a multimedia project with an original D12 system and an accompanying soundtrack, and so many other assets to really kind of immerse anybody who loves the Cthulhu mythos, loves science fiction, loves horror, and wants to dive into that. Like I said earlier, I'm a composer. My role in this project is to come up with the sound world and develop something that people and players can listen to, whether they're playing the game or they're like driving down the street or just hanging out in a dark room. It's that's my forte.
I mean, and listeners, just so you know, I can identify at least 8 instruments and several tentacles behind you. So
yes, Cthulhu has invaded my world.
I love that you can identify several tentacles. Like, oh, that one's Phil.
That's
I know that one.
Yeah.
I went to high school with you.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Reed, I feel like you're sort of not giving yourself enough credit. You create absolutely phenomenal music scapes for the campaign. That's true. You create the whole, musical world and outer worlds for sure. But you also much of the driving force. You're a lot of the passion behind this project, and it started off with you a little bit.
Yeah, I can. Well, I mean, yeah. Sorry, I buried the lead there, but yeah, definitely. Cthulhu Dreamt is a project that I started back in 2020 with some friends of mine. We got together and wrote an album of metal music, and the main driving force for me was to kind of pay homage to a child that my wife and I lost in childbirth, and really what I wanted to do was create a story kind of that aligned with my own, where this person in this story was grieving a loss, but they were scientific and trained in the scientific arts enough that they were able to open a portal to then go to another world and find a replacement, which is not what anybody really wants to do, I think. However, when they did this, they opened the veil, which allowed Cthulhu to then enter our world. So going back to the album, it's the story of, or the music follows the story of this character who did this, and the second album follows this period of liminality where Cthulhu is just in our world but hasn't woken up yet, and the game is what happens when Cthulhu wakes up.
You had me from the start as someone who's played drums for 20 years and was the metalhead going to all the local shows for quite a while. I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm all the way in.
Nice.
So yeah, I was definitely drawn. I think the other thing that's really interesting, because you're certainly not the only ones to start thinking of what does TTRPG look like in a post D&D world? We all had to, we all got the privilege of asking that question here earlier this year of, I wonder what the world would be like if this all just crumbles out beneath us, and insert Cthulhu. But the idea of adding, you mentioned a D12 based system. Can we touch on that a little bit? Like, is deep mechanically, or just kind of like the driving force behind that?
Yeah. So the system Sojourn was developed in-house by Adam Buffoni. It's really cool because it is a D12, because the D12 is kind of an underloved die, but it has more of a focus on the journeying aspect of role-playing than necessarily the combat, which does exist. Some of the other pillars that in Dungeons and Dragons, you've got like exploration and combat and social, and this system is really more focused around exploration. We have a whole journeying mechanic that influences how difficult things are on like in any given encounter. And so Brad, did you want to kind of break out a little bit more about that? Because I know you've been really in depth with it with Relay and March.
So the first thing is what we're finding with Springfield Nocturne, which is the adventure path that's available on the Kickstarter. From the moment you back, you can download the PDFs and run it with your friends. Is that the D12 is not necessarily less loved, it's just under loved, it's underutilized. Not to correct you, Snails, except that you're wrong and I hate you.
We've had some intense D12 talks on this podcast, because there's someone who runs a convention that we always go to, and he is a huge proponent of the D12. He created a B-movie system. Michael from the RPG Academy basically created a game centered around the D12, and he called it Action 12 Cinemas. So it's about like kind of, and then using that. I mean, ultimately, my boon to the D12 is it makes the best D4.
It does.
Because then you just have, so I have a bunch that are just Roman numerals 1 to 4 3 times on there, and then I don't have to worry about stepping on it the same way.
There you go. Love that. To Sojourn a little bit, the focus is on journeying first. It's also on giving the players agency. So instead of in your classic D&D game, you have, strength, dex, con, int, whiz, ka. And you've got a score and then a modifier. And so every time I roll with charisma, I personally get a -3 because that's just who I am. But, you're adding or subtracting your modifiers as necessary. Sojourn focuses on effort. So the idea is that you set a TN. If I'm the facilitator, I would say, you guys come to this chasm. You want to jump. You want to try and find a way to get over it. It's going to be a TN6, a target number, a DC. Then someone says, okay, I'm going to roll for that. And they do. Presumably they give a little bit of flavor, because that's sort of the fun of RPGs, I think. And then they roll, and there's no modifier unless they want there to be. So if they roll an 8, fantastic. How do you get over this? You're done. If you roll a 4, you've got statistics. You've got strong, cunning, agile, and I won't spoil the rest, not just because I can't remember them. But you've got points in those attributes, you've got basically each attribute essentially has a pool of points you can spend to up the die, to up the roll of the die. So in that way, fate is potentially on your side quite a bit. But also, if you're like, man, I really need to succeed on this, everyone's down. We really need to. The chips are really down. We've really got to make this one roll succeed. You've got points that you can spend, and I think in that way, I know I've been running a lot of games of D&D or Pathfinder or other systems where it comes to a really crucial role, and the player has a really cool speech they're giving. They're like, "Oh, this is a really sweet idea," and I think, "Yeah, absolutely. Roll to see if it succeeds." And they've got all the bonuses in the world. They just don't roll well enough. That's just they don't have the ability to get themselves there when they need it. So Sojourn is a system that sort of encourages that. It encourages you to put a little bit of effort into it. Cthulhu Dreamt is meant as a sort of survival horror game. In that way, effort itself, when you add that flavor on top of it, it becomes a resource. Effort itself becomes a resource. And we do some stuff with carrying capacity, and we do some stuff with decision making. And like Snails was saying, it's all about the journey. So there's like weather, easy to implement weather mechanics, stuff like that. And I've been talking for a while, so I'll give someone else a chance. But my very favorite thing about the way Sojourn works is that with that system, you can buy crit successes, which means that if it's a TN 10 and I roll an 11, I've succeeded. That's 1 point away from crit succeeding. And let me tell you, the ability to look at your players and be like, do you want to spend a little bit? Do you want to make that a really dope moment? From a facilitator standpoint, or as a player, to be able to be like, yeah, I really want to kick this door down. Like, really kick this door down is, I don't know, it's made for some fantastic moments. I'm done speaking now. Everyone's ears are still attached.
Brad has been removed from the call. No,
yeah. Brad has left the building. Now, just to flavor a little bit too of what Brad is saying, it's a really cool system as well, because from a player's perspective, there's a little bit of that resource management that goes into that as well, because you do have a pool of points that you can help your rolls out. But if it's getting to be a long day in the game, and you're coming up to something, you got to kind of wonder, do I have enough points? Am I gonna have enough points left to like make it to where we're going? So there are elements of that which are really cool. And yeah, like the Springfield Nocturne game, like I like on the team, I'm maybe the least gamer person on the team, but like it's so fun, and it's just a joy to play. Obviously I'm biased, so nobody's going to take my word for it, but
well, I really like the idea of those resource pools being available, because it adds, I mean, it's always a weird word to say because people get weird about it, but the moments of realism that you can add to a game where conceptually, I guess that's probably a better way to say it. Like, I can better conceptualize the idea that I have had a easy or hard day, even though the thing that I am doing is the same thing that I typically do from day to day. But the idea that, we're journeying, I come across this cliff, and like you said, the target number is a 10. I roll a 10. All right, cool, done. That, for whatever reason, I can say my character sees it, is like, boom, got it, done. And everyone could roll really well. And so then that day, that climb was easy. It was just structured in a way. The next place we come to, what if we all fail and we're all throwing resources at it? And then you change the narrative. It can be that thing where we all collectively talk about that stupid cliff that one time that took all our resources. Then we had to fight something at the top of the cliff that we knew we were supposed to. And then we had to just, dump everything we had, the last bits that we had, into that battle or that conflict or anything like that. Whereas the previous day, we just breeze right through it. And even in the same way that an individual player's character could have an easier day than another's. So yeah, I think it just, a conceptual realism that, each day can be a different, despite it being some of the air quote same things.
And one of the nice things about the system is that you do improve over the course of like our campaign that we have, because we have a main campaign, and then we have these spin-off side stories that are kind of like one shots that you can play. But during the main campaign, you do play a character that does improve and grow, and you get improvement points, and you can increase your pools and like get special abilities and such that like kind of make your life a little bit easier. But at no point do you ever run into that problem that kind of happens in Dungeons and Dragons where you've become a god. So your characters always remain kind of at this like base human level. They just get better at dealing with things. And it, as somebody who runs a lot of games for people and does do a lot of spooky games, it's nice that like even your characters can have, your players can have that progression and that feeling of advancement, but never leave necessarily the kind of spooky, scary vibe that you're going for. That just kind of vanishes in the later levels of Dungeons and Dragons.
Which is awesome, because I think that health points always kind of created a weird sense of what that means. And I feel like collectively as like a TT RPG community, we've moved more towards like a concept of like, oh no, I've like my health points represent exertion. My health points represent additionally my mental stamina. It's not solely, okay, cool, I can get stabbed 3 more times now that I've leveled up. Like that's not. And so I feel like, you know, because when this started in 2nd edition, I feel like really at its core, it was hit points equal number of times I can be stabbed. And I think that we've worked our way more towards the concept of, yeah, but people pass out all the time and they have not been stabbed. Like that idea of like, how much can I go through? And like you're saying, like you're leveling up, and it's not necessarily that you know your person is bigger or inherently stronger, but it's the idea that they've seen more, that they can deal with more things or have better solutions to deal with them, rather than, again, just being able to be stabbed more.
I do often wake up on days and decide, like, yeah, I could take 4 stabbings today.
Oh, this is a real one stabbing kind of day. Oh, I should go lay back down.
Most of my days are a one stabbing day, unfortunately.
Yeah. Theory tested and proven.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask, speaking of campaigns, what could a person find on this Kickstarter campaign if they were to head over to Kickstarter?
Oh, I mean, there's so much stuff. So just like the meat and potatoes, at any tier you back at, you're going to get like the base tier. Well, I guess the base tier is technically Lurker, which is for $1, you get access to all of the add-ons. But like the base digital tier is a PDF of the book, access immediately to Springfield Nocturne, our spin-off encounter, which is technically a 2-shot. And you get MP3s of the full and complete soundtrack. And then from there, it like goes up and gets bigger and better. The team is busy finalizing our next preview one-shot, which is called Relay and March, which is, you know, available as an add-on or like as part of certain tiers. And then we start getting into the physical, which is, you know, the really cool looking book and CD version of the soundtrack, as well as like the digital versions of those. And then we get to our Kickstarter exclusive stuff, which is like the book with a really awesome slipcase, which has like a phenomenal piece of art, which one of our creatures from the game, and it looks rad as hell. And you also get like the Kickstarter exclusive vinyl, which is something like I'm super stoked about, and I know like the rest of the team is also. But you know, the base version of that is a gatefold vinyl jacket, so you know, double duty as a facilitator screen, which is kind of the intent. And then, you know, you go all the way up to like our all-in tier, which has like the custom dice, like the custom Kickstarter t-shirt, like all of the really cool add-ons, all the versions. And then, you know, aside from the game stuff, we've got like the Entanglement, which is our tie-in novel. It's kind of the prequel to the game. So it's like the novel version of that 5-year liminality, you know. And then we've also got like crazy stuff like the conductor's score. You know, for part of the soundtrack, we had a couple different orchestras from around the world record some of the music. And so somebody who is either interested or like this is their life can get a book of the orchestral sheet music and follow along with those tracks and like see, you know, how everything was written, get composer's notes on all that. But yeah, I like Brad, I've been talking a little bit too long, so if there's anything I missed, guys.
And then there was one.
All right.
Just because Reed tends to undersell it slightly, the soundtrack is hours of music too. It's not like a couple of songs and we're done. It is literally, what was the last minute count at?
I mean, we're well over 3 hours at this point, and I haven't even started the ambient music for the main campaign.
Yeah, so like it's one of those things where like we're I think for like the CD release, we're looking at having to like cut certain songs because there just literally is too much music.
Oh, you got to go buy one of those really old school jewel cases that had that weird middle insert that would break all the time, so you can put all the CDs in it. There's gray in my beard if no one else can say about the sentence I just said.
Oh yeah,
I have one of those in my car actually.
Yes,
or the big fat ones like the Slayer Decade of Aggression live album. Oh man, so good.
Yeah, and as a person who has a record player that we don't have to talk about how much it costs, I'm very excied. For the vinyl. It's almost all I listen to now is either really high end, and I feel like it's just kind of the way things have gone, either really high end digital files or really well done. Because I mean, the pressings of modern records, if people don't know, is wild.
Yeah,
how far that technology has come because so many people have been invested in it. I'm going to throw something out at you. So a place to look for like really interesting things to be done, because you mentioned having the slipcase be the DM screen equivalent. A place to go look is called Vinyl Moon. So it's a subscription service that basically does like sound, is like almost like a compilation LP that you get monthly, and because of that, they do really interesting things with the covers that they put things into.
Oh, nice.
So one was like almost like had a Chinese dragon like you would see in kind of the parades and things like that, and you could build it and then set it on the post so then when the record plays it spins the whole time.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Kind of rounding us out, so where can people go to watch all that you are doing, as well as the best place to go to keep track, of course, of the Kickstarter and then any subsequent things that come out for Cthulhu Dreamt?
Well, the easiest place to go is CthulhuDreamt.com, which currently just forwards right onto the Kickstarter. If somebody's got the time and the willingness to go through the Kickstarter page, it's got links to the Discord for Action Fiction, which is where a lot of people are kind of congregating around the ARG that we have going on right now, of which I believe there are still 3 awards left to be handed out, or one if somebody can, if anybody can solve the ARG that is currently happening. But yeah, like Action Fiction Discord is a wonderful place to be after supporting the Kickstarter.
Perfect. We will have, and like I said, we'll have links to all of that in the proverbial show notes. But with that, we'll head out of the gym and we'll turn out the lights and head out of the gym. So to do that, head over to dungeonmasterblock.freeforums.net and try some DM-Nastics. So your players don't ask,
do you even lift?